The lights in the meeting room flickered as another ship passed by the station. Ambassador Richard Kane looked up from his papers and sighed. He had been sitting at this same table for 3 months now, trying to make peace with the Zephyrians. The talks were not going well. Across from him sat High Counselor Vexithera, a tall reptilian being with dark green scales and bright yellow eyes. The alien's long tail moved slowly behind her chair, a sign that she was getting angry. Kane had learned to read these signals over the past few weeks. "You humans think you own the galaxy," Vexithera said in her deep voice. "You spread to new worlds like a disease. You take what is not yours." Kane rubbed his tired eyes. "We only settle on empty planets. We don't take anything from other species. We follow all the space laws." "Empty." Vexithera's tail stopped moving. "Those worlds have been marked by us for centuries. Just because we have not built cities there does not mean they are free for you to take." The human ambassador leaned forward. "You never told us about these claims. How are we supposed to know?" "Ignorance is not an excuse," the alien replied. "Your kind moves too fast. You build too quickly. You do not think about others." Kane felt his patience running thin. These talks had started with simple border disputes. Now the Zephyrians wanted humans to leave 12 star systems. That would mean abandoning millions of colonists who had made new homes on those worlds. Through the large window, Kane could see Captain Lisa Morgan's ship, the UES Liberty. The battleship floated nearby, ready to protect the diplomatic station, if needed. Kane hoped it would not come to that. "We cannot abandon our colonies," Kane said firmly. "Those people have lived there for years. They have families, businesses, entire lives built on those worlds." Vexithera's eyes grew brighter. "Then you choose war over peace." The words hung in the air like a threat. Kane felt his heart beat faster. "We choose to protect our people, just as you would protect yours. Our people do not steal from others," the alien said, standing up from her chair. At full height, she was nearly 8 feet tall. "We do not spread like parasites across the stars." Kane stood as well, though he was much shorter than the Zephyrian. "We are not parasites. We are explorers. We seek new homes for our growing population. And when your population grows again, will you take more worlds? When does it end?" The human ambassador did not have a good answer. Earth was crowded, and humans did need new places to live. But they had always been careful to avoid conflicts with other species. A soft beep came from Kane's communication device. He looked down and saw a message from Commander Jake Sullivan, the station's security chief. The message was short but alarming. "Zephyrian fleet movements detected. Large force heading toward human space." Kane's blood ran cold. He looked up at Vexithera, who was watching him carefully. "Is there something you want to tell me?" Kane asked quietly. The alien's tail began moving again, faster this time. "What do you mean?" "Your ships are moving toward our territory. That does not seem very peaceful." Vexithera's expression did not change. "We must protect our interests. Your refusal to leave our claimed worlds forces us to take action." Kane felt the room growing warmer. Sweat formed on his forehead. "What kind of action?" "The kind that will make you understand how serious we are." The ambassador reached for his communication device again. Another message from Sullivan appeared. "Multiple Zephyrian battleships. They're armed and moving fast. Estimate 6 hours until they reach New Terra colony." Kane's hands started to shake. New Terra was home to 3 million human colonists. Most of them were farmers and miners, not soldiers. They would not be able to defend themselves against a military attack. "You cannot attack innocent civilians," Kane said, his voice rising. "That would be an act of war." "It would be an act of justice," Vexithera replied calmly. "You have been warned many times. You chose not to listen." Kane stood up so fast that his chair fell backward. "Those people have done nothing wrong. They are not soldiers. They are families trying to build better lives. Then they should have built those lives on human worlds, not on our ancient claims." The human ambassador felt anger building in his chest. For months he had tried to be reasonable, He had offered compromises, trade agreements, even shared technology. But the Zephyrians wanted only one thing: for humans to disappear from space they considered theirs. "We will not abandon our people," Kane said firmly. "If you attack them, we will defend them." Vexithara's yellow eyes seemed to glow brighter. "With what? Your small fleet? Your primitive weapons? We have ships that can destroy entire planets." Kane's communication device beeped again. This time the message was from Captain Morgan. "Ambassador, we're picking up more Zephyrian ships. They're surrounding the station. You need to evacuate now." Kane looked around the meeting room where he had spent so many hours trying to make peace. The walls were covered with star maps showing both human and Zephyrian territory. Red lines marked the disputed areas. Soon those lines might be drawn in blood instead of light. "This is your final chance," Vexithara said, her voice growing louder. "Order your people to leave our claimed worlds within 72 hours or face the consequences." Kane met her gaze without flinching. "And this is my final answer. We will not abandon our colonies. We will not leave our people defenseless. If you want those worlds, you will have to take them by force." The alien's tail lashed behind her like a whip. "So be it. The blood of your people will be on your hands, not ours." Kane's device beeped, urgently. Captain Morgan's voice came through clearly. "Ambassador, multiple Zephyrian ships are decloaking around the station. We need to leave immediately." Kane grabbed his papers and stuffed them into his briefcase. Months of careful negotiations, detailed proposals, and compromise offers. All worthless now. He had failed to prevent a war that could cost millions of lives. "I hope you can live with what you are about to do," Kane said to Vexithara as he headed for the door. "I hope you can live through what you have forced us to do," she replied. Kane ran through the station's corridors toward the docking bay. Other diplomats and staff members were also rushing to evacuate. The station's emergency alarms were sounding, filling the air with their urgent warning. In the docking bay, Kane could see the last shuttle waiting for him. Commander Sullivan was standing by the entrance, waving him forward. "Hurry, sir," Sullivan called out. "The Zephyrian ships are powering up their weapons." Kane ran faster, his briefcase bouncing against his leg. Behind him, he could hear the deep rumble of the station's defense systems activating. It would not be enough to stop a full Zephyrian attack, but it might buy them time to escape. As Kane reached the shuttle, he turned back for one last look at the diplomatic station where he had tried so hard to make peace. Through the large windows, he could see Zephyrian warships moving into attack positions. Their hulls were dark and sleek, like giant predators preparing to strike. The shuttle door closed behind him with a soft hiss. As they pulled away from the station, Kane watched through the small window as more Zephyrian ships appeared, dropping their invisibility cloaks to reveal a massive fleet. Captain Morgan's voice came over the radio. "All human ships. This is the Liberty. Diplomatic talks have failed. We are now in a state of war with the Zephyrian Empire. Prepare for combat operations." Kane closed his eyes and leaned back in his seat. After 30 years as a diplomat, he had finally failed when it mattered most. The war he had tried so hard to prevent was about to begin, and billions of lives hung in the balance. Admiral Grace Mitchell stood on the bridge of the UES Valiant, watching the star map display with growing concern. 3 red dots marked human colonies that had fallen to the Zephyrians in the past month. The alien fleet was moving steadily toward Earth and the other core human worlds. "Ma'am, we have reports from the Kepler system," said her aide, Commander Janet Ross. "The Zephyrians took the mining station there yesterday. They're getting closer to our main supply lines." Grace nodded grimly. The war had been going on for 4 months now, and the situation was getting worse. Yes, humans had learned to fight, back against Zephyrian shields, but the aliens had more ships, better weapons, and centuries of military experience. "What about Lieutenant Commander Clark's latest report?" Grace asked. Janet pulled up a file on her tablet. "He's had success with his new tactics on Proxima Station. Apparently the Zephyrians don't know how to handle our guerrilla attacks." Grace smiled slightly. Dan Clark was one of her best tactical officers, even though he was young and had unusual ideas about fighting. While other commanders tried to meet the Zephyrians in direct battle, Clark used hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, and tricks that confused the enemy. "Get Clark on the communication line," Grace ordered. "I want to hear his ideas for defending the core worlds." A few minutes later, Dan Clark's face appeared on the main screen. He was on a small patrol ship near the front lines, and his uniform looked like he had been in a fight recently. "Admiral, good to see you," Dan said with a tired smile. "I hope you're calling because you want to try something different." "I'm listening," Grace replied. "What do you have in mind?" Dan's expression became more serious. "The Zephyrians fight like they're playing chess. Every move is planned and logical. They expect us to do the same thing, but what if we don't play by their rules?" Grace leaned forward in her chair. "What do you mean?" "I mean we stop trying to fight their kind of war. We use small ships, not big ones. We attack when they don't expect it. We make them guess what we're going to do next." On another part of the ship, Dr. Maria Santos was working in her laboratory with a team of scientists. They had been studying captured Zephyrian weapons for weeks, trying to understand how the alien technology worked. "Look at this," Maria said to her assistant, Dr. Bob Turner. She held up a piece of metal that glowed with blue energy. "This is part of their plasma cannon. See how the energy flows through these channels?" Bob examined the piece through a microscope. "It's like their technology is alive. The energy moves like blood through veins." Maria nodded excitedly. "Exactly. But what if we could combine their energy system with our kinetic weapons? We could make bullets that carry plasma energy." The idea was risky. Human and Zephyrian technology were completely different. Human weapons relied on explosions and moving parts, while Zephyrian weapons used pure energy. But Maria believed they could create something new by mixing both approaches. "We'll need to test it carefully," Bob warned. "If we get it wrong, the weapon could explode in our hands." "Then we better get it right," Maria replied. Meanwhile, on the occupied world of Haven Colony, Captain Tony Miller was teaching civilians how to fight back against their Zephyrian occupiers. The aliens had taken control of the planet 2 weeks ago, but they were having trouble keeping the human population under control. "Remember, you don't have to kill them," Tony whispered to a group of colonists hiding in an abandoned warehouse. "You just have to make their lives difficult. Cut their communication lines, sabotage their equipment, make them waste time and resources." Ellen Price, a local teacher, raised her hand. "But they have those energy weapons. How can we fight against that?" Tony smiled and pulled out a small device. "With this, it's a signal jammer that blocks their communication systems. When they can't talk to each other, they get confused and make mistakes." The group of civilians looked at the device with amazement. It was just a small box with some wires, but it could disrupt the sophisticated Zephyrian technology. "We also have these," Tony continued, showing them small explosive devices. "Plant them near their vehicles and equipment. When they explode, the Zephyrians will think they're under attack by a large force." Over the next few days, the human resistance on Haven Colony began their campaign. They cut power lines, jammed communications, and set off small explosions near Zephyrian patrols. The aliens became paranoid and started seeing threats everywhere. Back on the UES Valiant, Admiral Grace received reports about the resistance activities. She was impressed by how effective the simple tactics were becoming. "The Zephyrians are requesting more troops for occupied worlds," reported Commander Ross. "They say the human populations are too difficult to control." Grace smiled. "Good. That means fewer ships attacking our remaining colonies." She turned to the communication screen where Dan Clark was still waiting. "Commander Clark, I want you to organize similar resistance operations on all occupied worlds. Can you do that?" "Already working on it, Admiral," Dan replied. "I've been in contact with Captain Miller and other resistance leaders. We're sharing ideas and equipment." On the alien side, War Commander Thex Moran was growing frustrated with the progress of the invasion. He stood in the command center of his flagship, studying reports from various battle zones. "These humans fight without honor," he said to his aide, Sub-Commander Kexriel. "They attack from hiding. They use tricks and deception. They do not face us in open battle." Kexriel's tail twitched nervously. "Perhaps we should adapt our tactics to match theirs." Thex Moran's eyes flashed with anger. We are Zephyrians. We do not hide like cowards. We face our enemies with strength and courage. But privately, Thex Moran was beginning to understand that strength and courage might not be enough to defeat the humans. Every day brought new reports of sabotage, ambushes, and unexpected attacks. His forces were spread thin across multiple worlds, trying to maintain control while also advancing the invasion. Back in Maria Santos's laboratory, the first test of the hybrid weapon was ready. She had created a rifle that fired bullets charged with Zephyrian plasma energy. The weapon looked like a normal human gun, but the bullets glowed with blue light. "Target practice time," Maria announced to her team. They set up a piece of Zephyrian armor as a target. The alien metal was known to be nearly indestructible using human weapons. Maria aimed the hybrid rifle and fired. The plasma-charged bullet struck the armor and burned straight through it, leaving a perfect hole. The team cheered with excitement. "We did it," Bob said with amazement. "We actually combined their technology with ours." Maria was already thinking about the next step. "Now we need to make thousands of these weapons. Every human soldier should have one." Word of the successful weapon test reached Admiral Grace within hours. For the first time since the war began, she felt truly hopeful about humanity's chances. "How soon can we start mass production?" she asked Maria over the communication line. "Give me 2 weeks to set up the manufacturing process," Maria replied. "But Admiral, there's something else. I think we can do more than just make better weapons. I think we can learn to build ships using Zephyrian technology too." Grace's eyes widened. Ships with energy shields and plasma weapons? Why not? If we can combine their energy systems with our engineering, we might be able to build vessels that are better than anything either species has made before. As the conversation ended, Grace looked out at the stars and felt a change in the war's momentum. Humans were no longer just defending themselves. They were learning, adapting, and becoming stronger. The Battle of Proxima Gate was approaching, and for the first time, Grace believed her forces might actually win a major victory against the Zephyrian fleet. The question was whether they could do it before the aliens reached Earth. 8 months had passed since the war began, and the cost was becoming terrible for both sides. Commander Kate Williams stood in the refugee processing center on Luna Station, watching thousands of humans who had fled from the war zones. Families carried everything they owned in small bags, their faces showing the fear and sadness of people who had lost their homes. "Ma'am, we have another transport coming in from the Vega system," reported Lieutenant Gary Chen. 3,000 more refugees. We're running out of space to put them all." Kate nodded sadly. Every day brought more displaced people. Entire colonies had been evacuated as the fighting spread across human space. The war had torn apart communities that had taken decades to build. "Set up temporary shelters in Cargo Bay. 7, Kate ordered. "And contact Earth. We need more supplies for the children." Among the refugees, Kate noticed a young girl sitting alone on a bench. The child couldn't have been more than 8 years old, and she was holding a small stuffed animal that looked like it had been through a fire. Kate walked over and knelt down beside the girl. "Hi there. What's your name?" "Lucy," the girl said quietly. "Are you going to help us find my mommy and daddy?" Kate felt her heart break a little. She had seen too many children separated from their families during the evacuations. "We're going to try our best, Lucy. Can you tell me where you last saw them?" "On Haven Colony. The scary aliens came and Daddy put me on a ship. He said he would come later, but he never did." Kate knew about Haven Colony. It had been one of the first worlds to fall to the Zephyrians. Many people had died in the fighting there, and many more were missing. Meanwhile, on the Zephyrian homeworld of Zephyria Prime, General Kexteril was facing his own problems. He stood before the High Council, trying to explain why the war was taking so much longer than planned. "The humans are more dangerous than we thought," Kexteril said to the council members. "They do not fight like civilized beings. They use tricks and deception. They turn our own weapons against us." Counselor Yexthani, an older Zephyrian with silver scales, spoke up from her seat. How many of our soldiers have died in this war, General? Kex Darrell's tail moved uncomfortably. The number is higher than expected. We have lost more warriors in 8 months than in any previous conflict in our history. The council chamber filled with unhappy murmurs. The Zephyrians had started this war expecting a quick victory. Instead, they were trapped in a long, bloody conflict that was costing them dearly. Perhaps it is time to consider peace negotiations, suggested Councillor Yexathani. Peace? Kex Darrell's voice rose with anger. After all the blood that has been spilled, after all our warriors who have died, we cannot show weakness now. Back in human space, Sergeant Nick Parker was leading a patrol through the ruins of Meridian City on the contested world of Kepler-7. The city had changed hands 3 times during the war, and now it looked like a wasteland of broken buildings and burned vehicles. Stay alert, Nick whispered to his squad. Intel says there might be wounded Zephyrians hiding in this area. His team moved carefully through the rubble, checking every doorway and corner. They had learned to be cautious. During the long months of fighting, too many good soldiers had died from Zephyrian ambushes. As they turned a corner, Nick heard a sound that made him stop. It was a low moaning, like someone in pain. He signaled his team to be ready and approached the source of the noise. Behind a collapsed wall, Nick found something he had never seen before: a Zephyrian field hospital. Several alien medics were treating wounded soldiers from both sides. Human and Zephyrian casualties lay on stretchers next to each other, receiving the same medical care. One of the Zephyrian medics, whose name tag read Vexapila, looked up when she saw Nick and his squad. Instead of reaching for a weapon, she held up her hands to show she was unarmed. Please, Vexapila said in broken human language. We treat wounded. No fighting here. Nick was amazed. He had been taught that Zephyrians were monsters who hated all humans, but this alien medic was risking her life to help injured human soldiers. Why are you helping our people? Nick asked, lowering his weapon. Vexapila looked down at a human soldier she was bandaging. Pain is same for all. Blood is red for humans, blue for us. But hurt feels same inside. Nick felt something change in his mind. For 8 months he had seen Zephyrians only as enemies to be killed. But this medic showed him that some aliens were just as decent as humans. At that moment, alarms started sounding throughout the area. Nick's radio crackled to life with an urgent message. All units, we have incoming hostile contacts. Unknown ships approaching the system. Nick looked at Vexapila with confusion. Unknown ships? But you're the only other species we know about. The Zephyrian medic's eyes grew wide with fear. Not us. Something else. Something bad. High above the planet, space suddenly filled with dark, angular ships that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. These vessels were different from both human and Zephyrian designs. They moved in perfect formation, like parts of a single mind. On the UES Valiant, Admiral Grace Mitchell watched the sensor readings with growing alarm. What are those things? She asked her tactical officer. Unknown, ma'am, replied Lieutenant Commander Dan Clark, who had been promoted after his successful tactics. They're not broadcasting any identification signals, but they're armed and moving toward both our ships and the Zephyrian fleet. Grace opened a channel to the Zephyrian command ship. This is Admiral Mitchell of the human fleet. Are those your reinforcements? War Commander Thex Moran's voice came back over the radio, and for the first time he sounded worried. They are not ours. We have never seen ships like those before. Before either commander could say more, the unknown ships opened fire. Their weapons were unlike anything humans or Zephyrians had ever seen. Dark energy beams struck ships from both fleets, and the vessels simply disappeared without explosions or debris. All ships, evasive action, Grace ordered. Return fire. The combined human and Zephyrian fleets found themselves fighting side by side against the mysterious attackers. Human plasma-charged weapons and Zephyrian energy cannons fired together at the dark ships. During the battle, Intelligence Officer Rachel Stone made a shocking discovery. While analyzing captured data from a damaged enemy vessel, "Admiral, you need to see this," she said urgently. Grace looked at the information on Rachel's screen and felt her blood run cold. The data showed communications between the unknown attackers and agents within both human and Zephyrian governments. "They've been manipulating us," Rachel explained. "These beings, they call themselves the Void Collective. They've been secretly influencing our leaders and Zephyrian politicians for years. They wanted us to fight each other." Grace understood immediately. "They weakened both our species with this war, so they could conquer us more easily." The revelation was transmitted to both human and Zephyrian commanders during the battle. For the first time in 8 months, the two species had a common enemy and a reason to work together, but the realization came at a terrible cost. As Grace coordinated the joint defense, a Void Collective ship targeted the Valiant with its main weapon. The dark energy beam struck the bridge directly. In her last moments, Admiral Grace Mitchell managed to send one final message to all ships. "Remember what we learned today. We are stronger together than apart. Don't let them divide us again." The Valiant exploded in a flash of light, taking Grace and her entire crew with it. But her sacrifice allowed the combined fleet to destroy several Void Collective ships and force the rest to retreat. As the battle ended, human and Zephyrian ships floated side by side in space. For the first time in 8 months, they were not shooting at each other. Instead, they were beginning to understand that their real enemy had been hiding in the shadows all along. Nick Parker looked up at the sky from the planet's surface, where he was still standing with the Zephyrian medic Vex Pila. The fighting overhead had stopped, but he knew this was just the beginning of something much bigger. "I think everything just changed," Nick said quietly. Vex Pila nodded, her yellow eyes reflecting the light from the burning wreckage in orbit. "Yes, now we fight together or we die together." 6 weeks had passed since the last diplomatic meeting. Colonel Amy Rodriguez crouched behind a broken concrete wall, listening to the sound of plasma fire overhead. The Zephyrian attack on New Terra Colony had begun 3 hours ago, and her forces were losing badly. "Colonel, we've lost contact with Delta Squad," reported Sergeant Billy Carter through her radio. His voice was shaky with fear. "The aliens just melted right through their bunker." Amy looked through her binoculars at the enemy forces advancing across the colony's main street. The Zephyrian soldiers moved in perfect formation, their energy, shields glowing blue around their bodies. Every time her troops fired their regular bullets, the rounds bounced off harmlessly. "Fall back to the school building," Amy ordered into her radio. "We need better cover." Around her, the colonial militia scrambled to retreat. These were not professional soldiers. They were farmers, shopkeepers, and mechanics who had volunteered to defend their homes. Most had never fired a weapon in anger before today. Amy watched as another group of her people tried to stop a Zephyrian tank. The alien vehicle looked like a floating metal egg covered in weapons. When the humans shot at it, their bullets sparked against its energy shield without doing any damage. The tank's plasma cannon fired once, and the entire building where her soldiers were hiding simply disappeared in a flash of green light. "This isn't working," muttered Engineer Paul Watson, who was crouched next to Amy. He was supposed to be fixing the colony's power systems, but the attack had trapped him here with the fighters. "Their shields stop everything we throw at them." Amy had to agree. The human weapons were designed to fight other humans, not aliens with advanced technology. Every plasma bolt from the Zephyrians could cut through steel and concrete like paper. Meanwhile, human bullets and explosives seemed useless against enemy shields. "There has to be a way," Amy said, more to herself than to Paul. "No defenses. Perfect." Paul was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then his eyes lit up. "Wait, I might have an idea. What happens if we hit their shields with lots of bullets really fast, instead of just a few big ones?" Amy looked at him with confusion. "What do you mean?" "Think about it like rain on a roof," Paul explained quickly. "A few big drops don't matter, but thousands of small drops all at once can overwhelm any system." Before Amy could respond, another plasma blast hit near their position. The heat made her face feel like she was standing too close to a fire. "Try it," she said. "We don't have anything to lose." Paul grabbed a machine gun from a fallen soldier and started working on it with tools from his belt. I need to modify the firing rate. Make it shoot much faster than normal. While Paul worked, Amy coordinated the retreat of her remaining forces. Out of 300 militia members, she had maybe half left. The rest were dead, wounded, or missing. The Zephyrians were advancing slowly but steadily, destroying everything in their path. 20 minutes later, Paul had finished his modifications. This should fire about 3 times faster than before, he said, holding up the modified weapon. But it will burn through ammunition really quick. Amy nodded. Let's test it. She took the weapon and aimed at a Zephyrian soldier who was walking alone near the colony's water tower. The alien's shield glowed bright blue around its body. Amy pulled the trigger and held it down. The gun roared to life, firing bullets so fast that they sounded like one continuous noise instead of separate shots. The first few bullets bounced off the shield as expected. But as more and more rounds hit the same spot, the blue glow started to flicker. After 5 seconds of continuous fire, the shield suddenly collapsed. The next bullet struck the Zephyrian soldier directly, and it fell to the ground. It worked, Paul shouted with excitement. The shield couldn't handle that many impacts at once. Amy felt hope for the first time since the battle began. Get on the radio. Tell everyone to modify their weapons the same way. We need rapid fire, not single shots. As word spread through the remaining human forces, the sound of battle began to change. Instead of scattered single gunshots, the air filled with the rapid chatter of modified machine guns. The Zephyrians, who had been advancing confidently, suddenly found their shields failing under the constant rain of bullets. But the aliens adapted quickly too. When they realized their shields were vulnerable, they began taking cover behind buildings and vehicles. What had been a one-sided massacre became a real fight. Captain Steve Collins watched the battle from his ship in orbit above New Terra Colony. His vessel, the UES Defender, was part of a small human fleet trying to stop the Zephyrian invasion force. In space, the situation was just as desperate as on the ground. "Sir, we've lost the cruiser Hampton," reported his weapons officer, Lieutenant Nancy Price. "Direct hit from a Zephyrian dreadnought." Steve could see the alien ship through his view screen. It was massive, at least twice the size of his own vessel, with weapons that could destroy a human ship with a single shot. The human fleet had started with 12 ships. Now only 5 remained. All ships, focus fire on the dreadnought's engines. Steve ordered over the fleet radio. "Maybe we can disable it." The remaining human ships moved into attack formation and fired all their weapons at the giant alien vessel. Missiles, lasers, and kinetic rounds struck the Zephyrian ship from multiple angles, but its shields absorbed everything without showing any sign of damage. The dreadnought turned slowly and fired its main weapon at the human cruiser Dallas. The plasma beam cut through the ship's hull like it was made of paper. The Dallas exploded in a ball of fire and debris. "Sir, we can't hurt that thing," said Lieutenant Price. "Our weapons aren't strong enough." Steve stared at the enemy ship and made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his short life. "All ships, this is Collins. I'm going to ram the dreadnought. Use the distraction to get the civilians out." "Captain, that's suicide," came the voice of Commander Kate Williams from the rescue ship Mercy. "There has to be another way." "There isn't time," Steve replied calmly. "Those people on the colony are counting on us. Sometimes you have to sacrifice one to save many." Steve ordered his crew to abandon ship in the escape pods, but he stayed at the controls. The UES Defender was an old ship, but it was still massive enough to do serious damage if it hit the right spot. He aimed his ship at the dreadnought's bridge and pushed the engines to maximum power. The alien vessel tried to turn away, but it was too big to move quickly. Steve's ship struck the dreadnought exactly where he had planned. The explosion lit up space like a new star. When the light faded, both ships were gone. The massive Zephyrian dreadnought had been destroyed by one human captain who refused to give up. Steve's final message echoed across all human communication channels. "They may have better tech, but they don't have our spirit." Back on New Terra Colony, Amy Rodriguez heard the captain's last words through her radio. Around her, the battle was still raging, but something had changed. The Zephyrian ground forces seemed confused and less organized without their command. Ship. Paul Watson had taught other engineers how to modify weapons for rapid fire. Now most of the human forces could penetrate alien shields. The battle was far from over, but it was no longer hopeless. Amy coordinated her forces for a counterattack against the disorganized Zephyrians. "Remember what Captain Collins said," she told her troops. "They have better weapons, but we have something they don't understand. We never give up." The Battle of New Terra Colony continued for 6 more hours. When it finally ended, both sides had paid a terrible price. Half the colony was destroyed and hundreds of humans were dead. But the Zephyrian invasion force had been stopped. As Amy walked through the ruins of the colony's main street, she saw human and Zephyrian bodies lying side by side. This war was far from over, and she knew many more would die before it ended. But Paul Watson's discovery about shield vulnerability and Captain Collins' sacrifice had proven something important. Humans could fight back against superior technology using their own strengths, creativity, determination, and the willingness to never surrender. The message spread quickly through human space. The war could be won, but it would require every human to fight with the same spirit that Steve Collins had shown in his final moments. 3 weeks after Admiral Grace Mitchell's death, Ambassador Richard Kane found himself in a very different kind of meeting room. This time, he was aboard the medical ship UES Mercy, floating in neutral space between human and Zephyrian fleets. Across from him sat High Counselor Vex Athara, the same alien leader he had argued with months ago. Both leaders looked older and more tired than before. The war had cost them dearly, and now they faced an even greater threat together. "I never thought I would see you again," Vex Athara said quietly. Her yellow eyes showed sadness instead of anger. Kane nodded slowly. "I never thought I would want to. But Admiral Mitchell was right. We are stronger together than apart." Through the window, Kane could see ships from both fleets working side by side. Human engineers were helping repair Zephyrian vessels damaged in the fight against the Void Collective, while Zephyrian technicians shared their energy shield technology with human crews. "My people are not happy about this alliance," Vex Athara admitted. "Many still see humans as enemies." "Mine feel the same way about Zephyrians," Kane replied. "But fear of the Void Collective is stronger than our old hatred." Captain Lisa Morgan, now commanding the Joint Human-Zephyrian Task Force, was investigating the extent of Void Collective infiltration. Her team had found evidence that the mysterious aliens had been influencing both governments for over a decade. "Look at this," said Intelligence Officer Rachel Stone, showing Lisa a series of documents. "These are communication records from Zephyrian and human politicians. Someone has been feeding them false information about each other for years." Lisa studied the files carefully. "The Void Collective made us think we were natural enemies. They probably did the same thing to other species. Which means this war between us was exactly what they wanted," Rachel concluded. "While we were fighting each other, they were preparing to conquer both our civilizations." Meanwhile, on Earth, General Amy Rodriguez was coordinating the planet's defenses. Reports indicated that massive Void Collective fleets were moving toward both human and Zephyrian space. The enemy was no longer hiding in the shadows. "Ma'am, we have confirmation from deep space sensors," reported Major Kevin Brooks. 3 separate Void Collective armadas are approaching. One is heading for Earth, one for Zephyria Prime, and one for the colonies. Amy looked at the tactical display with grim determination. The Void Collective had more ships than humans and Zephyrians combined. But the 2 former enemies had learned to fight together, and they had new technology that mixed human and Zephyrian designs. "Contact the Zephyrian Fleet Commander," Amy ordered. "Tell them we're ready to coordinate our defense." In space near the Zephyrian homeworld, War Commander Thex Moran was preparing his own forces. The proud warrior had finally accepted that honor sometimes meant working with former enemies. "Our scouts report the Void Collective ships are unlike anything we have faced before," his aide reported. "They seem to be controlled by a single mind, moving as one giant organism." Thex Moran's tail moved thoughtfully. "Then we must be unpredictable. The humans have taught us that chaos can defeat order." Back on the medical ship, Kane and Vex Athara had reached an agreement. The peace treaty they signed was simple but historic. Both species would share technology, establish joint colonies, and create a combined defense force against the Void Collective and any future threats. Our children will grow up in a different galaxy than we did, Vexithara said as she signed the document. Kane smiled for the first time in months. A better galaxy, I hope. The first test of their new alliance came sooner than expected. The Void Collective fleet attacking Earth arrived within hours of the peace signing. The combined human-Zephyrian fleet moved to intercept them at the edge of the solar system. Commander Lisa Hayes, who had been promoted to replace Admiral Mitchell, commanded the joint force from the new hybrid battleship UES Unity. The ship combined human engineering with Zephyrian energy technology, creating something more powerful than either species could build alone. "All ships, this is Commander Hayes," she announced over the radio. "Today we fight not as humans or Zephyrians but as allies defending our homes." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Void Collective ships moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls absorbing light and energy. But the combined fleet used tactics that confused their hive-mind enemy. Engineer Paul Watson, now working aboard a joint research vessel, had discovered something important about Void Collective technology. "Their ships are all connected," he explained to the fleet commanders. "They share information instantly, but that also means if we disrupt their connection, they become confused." Human ships used unpredictable maneuvers to draw Void Collective fire, while Zephyrian vessels provided covering fire with their powerful energy weapons. When the enemy tried to adapt to human tactics, Zephyrian discipline confused them. When they adjusted to Zephyrian strategy, human creativity surprised them. The turning point came when Sergeant Nick Parker, now leading a joint marine unit, managed to board a Void Collective command ship. His team included both humans and Zephyrians, including the medic Vexipila, who had showed him that former enemies could become friends. "The control center is through here," Vexipila said, using her knowledge of alien technology to guide them through the dark corridors. Inside the command center, Nick found something terrifying. Thousands of beings from different species, all connected to machines that controlled their minds. The Void Collective was not one species, but many species that had been enslaved and turned into a single consciousness. "We have to free them," Nick said, looking at the horror before him. Paul Watson's voice came through his radio. "Nick, if you can disrupt their central control system, it might break their connection to each other." Working together, the joint marine team began destroying the control machines. As each device was destroyed, some of the enslaved beings began to wake up and remember who they had been before the Void Collective captured them. With their command structure disrupted, the Void Collective fleet began to fall apart. Ships that had moved in perfect coordination suddenly became confused and started firing at each other. The combined human-Zephyrian fleet pressed their advantage and destroyed the remaining enemy vessels. Similar battles took place near Zephyria Prime and the colony worlds. In each case, the unpredictable combination of human creativity and Zephyrian technology proved superior to the Void Collective's hive mind. After the war ended, Kane and Vexithara met again to discuss the future. This time, they were joined by representatives from several species that had been freed from Void Collective control. "We have learned something important," Kane said to the gathering. "Our differences make us stronger, not weaker. The Void Collective failed because they tried to make everyone the same." Vexithara nodded in agreement. "Humans taught us that sometimes the best strategy is to have no strategy at all. Chaos can defeat order when used wisely." Over the following months, the new alliance grew stronger. Human and Zephyrian colonies were established side by side, with families from both species working together to build better lives. The hybrid technologies developed during the war led to advances that benefited everyone. Dr. Maria Santos, now head of the Joint Research Program, made breakthrough after breakthrough as human and Zephyrian scientists shared their knowledge. "We're achieving things that neither species could have done alone," she reported to the Alliance Council. The most powerful symbol of the new friendship was New Terra Colony, which had been rebuilt after the war. Human and Zephyrian children played together in the same schools, while their parents worked side by side in the factories and farms. Nick Parker, now a colonel in the Joint Defense Force, often watched the children playing and remembered the medic who had taught him that pain was the same for everyone. Vexpila had become the head of the medical corps, treating patients from many different species with the same compassion she had shown during the war. "It's amazing how much can change," Nick said to her one day as they watched Human and Zephyrian, children building something together in the playground. Vexpila smiled, something she had learned to do from watching humans. "Yes, war brought us together, but peace will keep us together." Ambassador Kane, now serving as the first director of the Galactic Alliance, stood at his office window looking out at the busy spaceport. Ships from dozens of species came and went, carrying trade goods, travelers, and messages of friendship. The war that had started with the breakdown of diplomacy had ended with the strongest alliance in galactic history. Former enemies had become the closest friends, proving that even the darkest conflicts could lead to the brightest futures. As Kane watched a group of young humans and Zephyrians working together to load supplies for a new colony mission, he remembered Admiral Mitchell's final words, "We are stronger together than apart." Those words had become the motto of the new alliance, and the foundation of a better galaxy for all.